I think education is so important, like putting that education into your context. Don't look at the plan as the Bible, because you have to make those individual changes so that it works for you, and it's okay.
Welcome to the Athlete's Compass podcast. Each week, renowned sports scientist and founder of Athletica.AI, Dr. Paul Laursen, athlete, coach, and sports scientist Marjaana Rakai, and coach and cyclist Paul Warloski discuss training, racing, and improving your health and fitness. Get ready for your journey to peak performance. Hello and welcome to the Athlete's Compass podcast, where we navigate training, fitness, and health for everyday athletes. In 2015, Dr. Paul Laursen started work on creating Athletica, an AI-based training program that has in many ways revolutionized the endurance sport training world. We often refer to Athletica on the Athlete's Compass podcast, and today we're going to dig in to the specific structure and format of Athletica and its workouts as a way of showing what a scientifically based training program can look like. So, Paul, let's start with the origin story of Athletica and HIIT Science. How did that all get started?
So I've told the story, on a number of different occasions, but the general gist is that I was a guy growing up loving the sport of triathlon as a youngin and wanting to be an Olympic athlete, and that didn't pan out. So when I kind of failed at my mission within that training, I was like, why was it that I wasn't going, fast? And I turned to science, studied it lots, and then moved it, through a long career of research in the area. And, this is a 20-year story, 30-year story that kind of cuts to a book. And then, at the end of the day, after 150 peer-reviewed publications and a textbook on the whole topic, we have sort of a real foundation of now understanding if we advance kind of that 20 years. So, and then, after writing the book and building the course at HIIT Science, it was, well, now with all of the, input sensors, we can really get insight and bring intelligence into training. So that is really the origin story of Athletica, how it's moved from my pain point as a failed athlete through to HIIT Science and the textbook, through to the app that you see today. We're trying to always answer the question, whether it's HIIT Science or Athletica, what is the best session I can do right now, today, to enhance my performance tomorrow? And that's what Athletica tries to deliver to you. And because of sensor technology now, we can come at this so much better than 20, 30 years ago when I was a youngin', kind of trying to do it blindly. We've got excellent guide rails now that really change the game in terms of how you can make forward progress in your training.
So we often have like several sensors. We have heart rate, we have running pace, cycling power, we have HRV, sleep data. We have so much data today. What are we trying to do with Athletica with all that data? Because it gets confusing for everyday athletes.
Yeah. Well, it certainly does. So the very first thing, even before we put all that data in there, we have to have a plan, right? And we had Andrea on with us last time, and he always mentions that the crux and the real advantage of Athletica are indeed the plans that are within the backbone of Athletica. So that's the plans that you as a user of Athletica are getting. You're getting a training structure that is similar to what an elite athlete would get. Now, to your question, MJ, all of those input data go into feeding and answering the question, feeding the engine and answering the question, did you actually do what the foundation plan template suggested? So, and even before we go there, we have to think about all the different things that Athletica is doing for you as a user. with your historical download of your data, whether you're using a Garmin system or another system via Strava. We're capturing your profile. And we just went over, the last two podcasts with Andrea, we went over what your profile is, right? How fast you can go and how long you can go ultimately. And that's the very first thing. So we're already starting at a better place than we were many years ago. We really, we've already gauged what those capacities and capabilities are in you, and now we can begin to take those template plans and just curve them down a little bit, but make them appropriate to what you are available to do. It's fine if we've got Alistair Brownlee's amazing plan, but and his coach Malcolm Brown said, it's not the plan, it's can you do it, right? And it's just so true, right? Like there's no point for the bulk of us, 99% of us, to do what Alistair Brownlee, two-time gold medalist in the triathlon, can do, right? Because we just don't have that ability. But now with the wearable and the download of that, we actually have something that is what we can do. So we can still do a plan like Alistair Brownlee does, but we're doing it at our own, to our own level. And when we do it like that, that means the adaptation is going to be, in theory, optimal, right? Because we can, and we've spoken about this many times too, right? But it's like there's no point in absolutely flogging yourself for any one given workout, with the exception of the race. That's the only time when you should be going absolutely all in with nothing left and putting it all online. But if you did that in every training session, you're not going to advance to the level that you can. And that's why you're always doing little pieces of this race. You're having a workout, but you're not binning yourself. So we're doing away with the no pain, no gain sort of philosophy. So yeah, again, sorry, I'm sidestepping all around your question, Marjaana, but it's like the power, the heart rate, the pace, that data all goes into saying, how did you do that workout relative to what the template plan prescribed, first and foremost. And then, again, back to some of the work that Andreas discussed last podcast. He was talking about Bannister's fitness and fatigue modeling. We can again go through and say, what should we do now tomorrow, based on how fatigued you are or how fit you are, on what your form is or your freshness. So again, we can dial in and give, again, what is a theoretical optimal. So it's always giving your theoretical optimal best session, the best session you can do today, now, or tomorrow, to get the results that you're after for whatever event you're targeting. Again, always with the goal of building up your fitness potential, right? Your chronic training load and your total fitness potential, theoretical. So those are the main ones, MJ. I know you mentioned HRV as well, and that's a load response marker. That's another little fine tuning one that we get to. That at this point in the game, that's just one that we're using to get insight and tell the user about. It's hooked up to the large language models as well, so you can, if you read those markers and you're monitoring HRV with the Garmin system, you can also sort of see what's actually recommended based on how you're responding to that training, remembering that we all respond different to the same individual plan.
So I want to double tap on the adaptation to individual athlete. So practically we have the template plan, and then when somebody hooks up their wearable or historical data, then Athletica calculates training zones and takes the template, okay, this is a good plan, and then gives, for example, intervals. Okay, let's start this guy with 5 times 30-30s instead of what Alistair might be doing, like 20-30-30s or 30-30-30s, like, so it's just adapts from the template plan where the individual athlete is, so that it doesn't give the highest possible
That's
training
right.
load for this guy as he's starting to train with Athletica. What other
Correct.
what other adaptations is Athletica doing for the athlete? We have how many intervals, and then we have the pace or power targets. What else does Athletica do?
Yeah, so all those different things. So it's through your, again, with the podcast we did last with Andrea Zignoli, we're always leveraging maximal mean powers. And again, if you don't really understand what those are, have a listen to the last podcast. So basically, how hard you can go for how long, right across the power duration spectrum, and yeah, it continues to adapt in those different domains. So it's giving you it's always, as we learned with these new zone updates that just came out, where there are adaptations that are occurring all around your own profile, that power duration profile. So your zones are always updating in accordance with what Athletica is seeing from your training, and that's your fingerprint that Athletica is eyeballing. So those adaptations are occurring. At the end of the day, we always want to be adapting to be able to do more work. So we have the ability somehow to to build our engines to be able to deliver more work at the end of the day. Sometimes more work in a short period of time, like high intensity work, or more work over a longer duration, right? So you're going faster over the long durations, like Ironman. So both are desirable for from the adaptation standpoint. And yeah, Athletica is building out the duration using that same banister model we spoke about, and it's building out I guess the duration or the amount of work that you can actually do at these higher intensities too. Andrea spoke about the workout reserve, which is his baby, and it monitors that too, right? So you can actually see that the work that you're doing in these different power domains, these little bin units of maximal mean powers, that part of the equation is adapting as well. But it's again, back to the no pain no gain philosophy that we're not about. You're just getting it's just hitting enough so that your battery is not fully depleted, not completely crashed every single time. Maybe a little bit. Sometimes I like to go a little bit into the negatives, because I know I'm going to adapt the next time. But it's like, these are the things that it's kind of looking at from an algorithm sort of standpoint, always to make you do more work for longer or more work in a short period of time.
So what happens when somebody goes and bins themselves, goes a little too hard on their boys group ride? What happens
Yeah.
to the day after a training session?
That's a great question. And what happens, as you know, MJ, is that Athletica recognizes that. And then all of a sudden, it usually down regulates the next couple days, because we always take a conservative approach. Our goal is to keep you healthy. And the aim of Athletica is to not, if you've all of a sudden binned yourself on the group ride, because there's been some fast rabbits in there or whatever the case may be, again, Athletica is going to take note that effort was harder than usual, and it wants to, in theory, this is the logic Andrea was talking about, and yeah, it will slow things down in the next day to make sure that your theoretical recovery is optimal. So yeah, again, giving you the fastest road to Rome, so to speak.
Is
So
the
there's no
opposite still
hiding.
is the opposite still true if you don't go hard enough in for a workout? Does it adapt down the road as
Yeah.
well?
It does, yeah, for sure, and a same sort of thing. So, and you'll notice these if you're paying attention to the different icons that are on Athletica. You'll say, and in some of them, if you just like, I think it's an eye. It's like It's a little I with an asterisk sometimes over the load change. So you can change your settings on Athletica to actually see what the adaptations are going. So sometimes it will say, in the former example that we were talking about with MJ, where you've binned yourself, you'll hear it actually say, session is lowered to prevent overtraining. So reduced load to prevent overtraining. And then in the opposite case that Paul just mentioned, it would say training load increased to enhance, adaptation. So it's to extend progressive overload. I think that's the exact term. So it does both, Paul.
So there are training plans for cycling, running, triathlon, and now rowing. How did you settle on the template of those workouts, the structure of those workouts?
Yeah. So everyone's a little bit different, but for the most part, those you can find those right here in the Science and Application of High Intensity Interval Training book, and the structure is, generally speaking, more or less what the expert. Let me just tell you about the book. So the book is 10 chapters for the most part written by Martin and I, 10 science chapters, and then we have 20 experts that are individuals that are like embedded within the sports, real professionals that are at the coalface of elite sport. They come in and they explain how they use the principles that Martin and I profess in the 10 chapters, but in their sport, because we always say context over content. So every sport is a little bit different from that perspective. So the foundation of the plans are right from the book. So if it's cycling, they're Mark Quad's cycling plans from a template standpoint. Mark Quad has been with Orica Green Edge, Garmin Slipstream, and a mess of other pro teams. He's kind of done that for the last 20 years. And then for triathlon, Dan Plews and myself. For running, Jamie Stanley and others. We've got, and then for rowing, also Dan Plews, who's worked with the New Zealand rowing squad. And then MJ is actually running the cross country plans at this point. So she's right in the trenches right now, and she's working with Oyvind Sandbach, Professor Oyvind Sandbach, who's written the cross country plans in the textbook. So she's using his templates, moving them into the back end. And perfect time, MJ, to kind of segue to you. How's that all going for you?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I love it, and it makes me even more keen on switching over to skiing again. I just need some more snow in Texas, but yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Great. Yeah, well, we're grateful for your contributions over there.
So the basic workouts within the templates get repeated. For example, in my cycling program, it's typically a recovery ride on Monday, 30-30s on Tuesdays, strength endurance on Wednesdays, endurance on Thursdays, thresholds Fridays, endurance Saturdays, and tempos on Sundays. But we'll talk about the workout wizard in a moment. But why did you pick the workouts in those orders? Is it because of what the people said in the HIIT Science text?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it tends to be, actually, it's probably the biggest consideration across all of our sports and all of our programming. It's discussed at length in the book, and it is the neuromuscular variable, for lack of a better term, right? The neuromuscular musculoskeletal strain, at least perceived as the biggest player to when you kind of should be able to adjust a session across any given sport. This is kind of the fundamental thing that's clear across all of them. A lot of work being done to this. And actually, I was just listening to Martin on our sister podcast, Training Science podcast, right? And he was interviewing, I forget the expert, but they again were back talking about the importance of appreciating the neuromuscular variable. And this is, again, so just so everyone's on the same page, you'll know this if you have muscle damage feeling or real soreness the next day, right? Like that is the neuromuscular variable. And you always, in any given training session, you're going to get a degree of that, because, and it's like there's some little bit of damage in there. Think of the extreme would be like running down a hill for long periods of time. You know you're going to be just absolutely killed the next day. Or you're doing a crazy weight workout, say, for example, right? And you really feel the muscle damage the next day. These are the neuromuscular strain. But even in a cycling exercise, like a strength endurance session, that's the purpose of it. You should be delivering some kind of a neuromuscular stress in that, either a low cadence or a high cadence work. It doesn't really matter. Either should sort of have that. And even in the case of a short interval work, it's kind of a degree of neuromuscular strain also that's in that one too, because it's done at, with high power. So I guess that is the long-winded answer to the question, Paul, is that related to the neuromuscular strain, that those tend to, and this kind of comes from coach feel, but the coach feel about those sessions is that's kind of the optimal order to move those into place based on the feel of that coach, but it's not, and the likely individual response. But this is where coach's eye, both you and MJ, Paul, are is so key, because you might have a person where they need to do things different, or that might be too much neuromuscular strain at this point in the game for that one individual. And maybe I'm only doing a short interval 1 week and a strength endurance the next week. It just, everyone is a little bit different. We always say context over content.
Mm-hmm. I think for people who don't have a coach, it's important to really recognize that and think, how do I feel? Like if you have Tuesday, like in triathlon plan, Tuesday strength endurance, then you have short intervals Wednesday, and then you have on the bike, and then you have short intervals often Thursday running.
Yeah.
And if those 3 days is too much, try to like spread them out. Like look at your plan during the weekend and make sure that you spread them out just a little bit to give enough time for your body to get rid of that fatigue. So
exactly. Yeah.
you need to do
Or
something Monday, and
totally.
then Wednesday, and then Friday.
Exactly. Or even like, again, it's just, this is why I really, I'm reflecting when we went on the Athletica journey with my colleague Martin from Hit Science. He said, "You're never going to do this because there's so much context," and yet we're just highlighting this right now, right? Obviously, we've come a long ways, and he's changed his mind, but it's like, because he's quite aware of all these little small nuances. And it isn't easy for the individual to know of every one of these sorts of things. And this is where discussion on our forum and educating the individual is kind of so important, right? Like you might not get the perfect plan right out of the gates, and you might have to go out there and fail a little bit. But if you think about things, really listen, reflect, and learn, you really find that optimal. And this is what people are reporting is happening to them, right? So it's cool.
Yeah, I think education is so important, like and putting that education into your context, and really like don't look at the plan as the Bible, because you have to make those individual changes so that it works for you, and it's okay. But tell us, why should we repeat workouts?
Aha. Yes. The infamous question of, why are these always the same, everyone, week in, week out, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, this is good training, because you've got that, every week you have a test. You're testing without testing, because if you know your numbers in those 30-30s, you know what you should sort of be targeting. You know what your average power should probably be in those various different things. And you've got you've got a new tool. You've got your workout reserve number that you can reflect on. Remember we learned last time with Andrea, this tool, every week you can actually see a reflection of the last 6 weeks. So if you're hitting personal bests in that 30-30, because you can either watch it live on your watch, or you can just look at the green line in your session analysis and reflect on it. But that's the reason why, right? Like, you don't have to. You can switch it up with the workout wizard. Do a 40-20 like you sometimes do, MJ, or do a 20-10. There's all those different things. But the template is 30-30. It tends to be the best middle ground for a short interval workout that is a relatively low stress workout. Even though the power is high, the 30 seconds of rest and recovery, which should be done mostly towards passive, right? Zone 1 or even less. Just turning legs over. Make the emphasis on the work interval. That recovery period, we've spoken about this before on other podcasts, utilizes the myoglobin, which is the protein that's in the muscle that resaturates really quickly in terms of its oxygen level, lowering the lactate. You lower the lactate, you lower the sympathetic response. You're more fresh than if you were going to bin yourself. So even in a strong 30-30 workout, you're still usually less stressed than, say, for example, a 4x4 minutes, like VO2 max, kind of, between zone 5 and 6. Like, that's really taxing from a lactate sort of standpoint. It can be, at least. Depends on the diesel versus twitchy athlete. Spoken about this before, but yeah, that's why 30-30s are repeated day in, day out, week in, week out.
We're doing them together with the group every week. And once we start doing the efforts, the 30-second break, it's very quiet. There's like no talking.
And just to clarify, Paul, you talked about the workout wizard, but that is a drop-down menu that for each day you can choose a different kind of workout that meets the same relative load, or if you're sick or injured, it gives you an alternative too.
Yep, exactly, Paul. Yep, for sure. So different sessions that are of a similar load. Remember, load is the stress on your body, right? So every day, that algorithm we spoke about, that's there to keep you from overtraining. It's still, it sits there as the foundation of that workout wizard, so that any one of those, you can go in there and kind of flick things around, swipe right, swipe left kind of thing, and figure out if you want to do, something a little bit longer, something a little bit, more intensity, depending on how you're feeling, or if you're injured, there's options there as well. So, and diversity as well. Diversity is another one. Just if you're getting bored of that same 30-30, as people are kind of, we get that feedback sometimes, then you can mix it up.
Yeah, I want to talk more about the workout wizard, because I have a feeling a lot of people want to stick to the template plan and not do any changes. Can we talk about why we maybe should diversify a little bit more?
Yeah. Well, it's like the old quarterback that is being, wanting to call an audible in NFL football kind of analogy, like the context over content. So sometimes you want to change things up. There's so many different reasons, right, that are in front of you on a daily basis that in terms of reasons why you will want to switch that thing up. So make sure that the context in front of you is the thing that's driving your plan over the content. So just, every day you sit in front of you, you've got this plan, but is that lining up with your daily life? How much work stress do we have? How's your calendar looking? Are you able to sort of slot that in? How's your health and fitness? And, so really think about your context before you double click on that session, that's the one you're going to do. So you've always kind of got that option with the workout wizard. So that's what it's there for, because we know the context rules over the content.
That is a lot. And I appreciate your time talking about Athletica. I use Athletica both, as an athlete and as a coach. Marjaana does the same. It's a great product. And in terms of wrapping up, the three things that I've learned today, Athletica started, and its foundation is in the structure of the HIIT Science textbook, The Science and Application of High Intensity Interval Training, that Paul and Martin wrote. Number two, the workouts are always focused on what is the best session today to enhance your performance tomorrow. And it really, there's no point in flogging yourself. There's no point in beating yourself up. It's like, what's going to be best for tomorrow? And the workouts are always the same. I mean, you can change them with Workout Reserve, but it's good training. It's good to do that kind of work day in and day out, because every week, as Paul said, you have a test. You can look in the Workout Reserve and really see that you're hitting your personal bests and your workout targets, but it is solidly good training.
Yeah, I would like to maybe just on the very last point, it segues perfect, Paul, and maybe I wasn't clear enough, but with those sessions, they're there to prepare you specifically for the demands of the event that you've chosen, right? So when you're on Athletic and you've chosen your event, whether it's a time trial in cycling or a middle distance triathlon or a 10K running race, the sessions are specifically they're made to prepare you. Even if it's a strength endurance session that has components of the neuromuscular componentry to prepare you, the short intervals typically enhance the VO2 max aspect that we know is important. And then the specific weekend sessions, almost across all of them, tend to be race-specific efforts, especially within the build phase of Athletica. So I probably didn't bring that forth enough in this podcast, but make no mistake about it. Principle of specificity rules. And that's why the template plans are used for. They're specific sessions. They're pieces of your event that are going to prepare you physiologically to maximize your training on D-Day. So I think it's a pretty important thing to add, and a good place to potentially leave it, Paul.
That's all for this week. Join us next week on the Athletes Compass podcast. Ask your training questions in the comments or on our social media or in the forum on Athletica.AI. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd appreciate it if you would take a moment to give us a 5-star review. For more information or to schedule a consultation with Paul, Laursen, Marjaana, or myself, check the links in the show notes. For Marjaana Rakai and Dr. Paul Laursen, I am Paul Warloski, and this has been the Athletes Compass podcast. Thank you so much for listening.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Athletes Compass podcast, your North Star through the sometimes complicated world of training for your endurance sport. We appreciate your comments and training questions and your 5-star reviews. For a deeper dive into the science of endurance sports, listen to the Training Science podcast and check out the adaptive AI training platform Athletica.AI. Thanks for listening.